welcome everybody, and I'm talking about weed control. Everything you need to know in 15 minutes, so it's quite an impossible task really. But you have got a leaflet in your folder which includes all the diagrams, graphs, etc., and some notes about what I'm talking about today. So hopefully that will help you when you get home and want to have a recap of what we've talked about. So what I've done is actually picked out some key subjects that I'm often asked when we're in the middle of the sugar beet season or just prior to it. It won't always be relevant to each year or to all of you, but they're just some of the key points that I thought may be of use. So the first thing, I think planning is absolute key, and we have got a little bit more complicated, I think, in some of the decisions we have to make. We have a choice now on smart varieties, conventional varieties. Some of us are renting in land. We don't always know what weed spectrum that we're going to be seeing. ALS resistance, that's occurring as well. And also sprayer capacity. It's nothing worse than those who are given a recommendation thinking the sprayer can get round in 7 days, and yet in reality it's going to be probably 10 to 14 days. So at this time of the year, I think it's really crucial that you actually sit down and have a look at what you're going to be doing, discussing about whether you put a pre-em or on or not. The last few years that's worked very well because we've had moist conditions when we've been drilling. And look at the costs as well, do some budgeting, look at the product availability. Do you do straights or do you do formulated mixes, and what is actually available to you to use as well. So planning, to me, is key. Variable crop emergence, that's not been an issue for us the last few seasons because, as I mentioned, we've had quite a sort of moist seed bed at drilling, and crop has come through fairly evenly, or very evenly. But in some years, we can get a situation where it will take quite a while for us to get to full crop cover. And this example here, we were seeing in April that we'd got around 20,000 plants emerged of the sugar beet crop. And it wasn't until June, when we got some rain, that we got up to 82,000 plants. And the question often is, when you've got a low population, is should I actually be spending money on a herbicide or not? And it's very difficult to persuade yourself to put a herbicide on if you've only got 20,000 plants there. So my advice would be is look and see if the seed is viable, that it's not yet emerged. You can have a look with a hand lens, see if it's actually cracked. If it has, you then need to really think about, is that still viable? Because it might have imbibed some water and then just dried off and then becomes no longer going to germinate. So do a quick germination test. Ask for some help from BBRO or put some on a damp tissue paper in a warm environment. It doesn't take long to see if it's going to chit or not. We had a trial in this field, in this example, and we were seeing when the sugar beet were emerging, we'd got knotgrass emerging as well. Very difficult weed to control. And on the untreated plots in our trial in that field, when we come to June, the knotgrass hadn't had a herbicide. It was really big. We'd have never controlled it with a herbicide, and it was obviously going to compete with the crop for yield and also be a problem for harvest. So my key message here, if you've got variable crop emergence, the seed is still viable of the sugar beet, you start spraying. You might need to think about what mix you use, but you need to be putting something on to hold those weeds back so that you can keep on top of them. There's nothing worse than having an open canopy through here and letting those weeds keep growing. There are 3 key actives when we're talking about conventional chemistry: fenmedifan, metametron and ethofumicate. I always start with those, look at them and see what weeds they're going to be controlling, and then you think about what other weeds you can expect and add other actives in accordingly. For instance, clopyridine for volunteer potatoes or thistles, etc. So I look at those as the building blocks. And then there's factors impacting on herbicide activity. And that can be soil pH, soil structure, as we talked about here, moisture, etc. And so it's key. If you have an issue with pH, I've seen examples where we've got it's very acidic, you put herbicides on, and that can really hit the crop. Not the fault of the herbicide, it's the underlying conditions. Now, any of you in this room used Lenasil or Venzar last year and had any crop issues? Can you wave a hand? I have got one brave person. I think there's probably more than that. And I think that was not the fault of the active. We've had it for a long while. It can be very useful in a programme. But if you use Venzar or Lenasil in tank mix with other chemistry that can be quite hard on the crop, and you put it on just before a rainfall and you've got underlying conditions, that can cause issues. So I think we had got a bit complacent with that. So this chart here shows crop vigour, just to emphasise that when we put straight actives onto the sugar beet crop, so 3 applications of ethofumazate, 3 applications of metametron, or 3 of Venzar Lenasil, we can see the impact on that crop. Metametron, as in gold ticks, very, very kind, and that can be used at any crop growth stage. It's on all the metametron labels with an adjuvant, and it's very useful as a hold and spray if you're in this sort of situation where you've not got a full crop or you've got some underlying issues. But as you can see there, triflusulfuron methyl debut and Lenasil, the loss of vigour there, down to 60%. Clopyralid is not on there, but I'd expect that similar. You put all those 3 in a situation where the crop is stressed, then you get rainfall, heavy rainfall, you can have issues. So I think just be careful and think about what you're actually doing and applying to the crop. What about resistance? Now, when I talk about resistance in sugar beet, we've not really talked about that much historically, because we've been very good at using tank mixers of different actives which have different modes of action. So if we have got resistance there, we don't see it. But across the rotation, so not just sugar beet, across the rotation, we've been using what we call ALS chemistry, mode of action group 2, on nearly all our crops: potatoes, cereals, oilseed rape, as with the Clearfield. They've all been using this ALS chemistry for about 20 plus years. And so there has been instance of resistance there to weeds like poppies, chickweed, mayweed, etc. So when we go to using the smart varieties and Conviso 1, the Conviso 1 consists of just 2 actives which are in mode of action group 2, both ALS. And so we then start to see some issues like we've got there. So it doesn't mean you stop growing smart varieties, but you need to rethink your programme and include perhaps some conventional chemistry there as well. We've been doing some tests with ADAS Boxworth. We're now in our 2nd year of screens. The results will be through the end of this month. And along here, these are fields. And also, we include some susceptible strains that we know are susceptible to the ALS chemistry of poppy and chickweed. And what we see is with the susceptible ones, we've actually taken the seed, we've planted it, let it grow on, and then sprayed it with a full rate of Conviso 1. The susceptible ones, we get 100% death. There's nothing, it's complete control. We also found that with one batch of seed from a farm. So it's not always resistance. Don't think you've always got resistance there. It can be other factors as well that are kicking in. But on these other ones, we were getting a reduced level of control. There was still some green matter there. The weeds were still hanging on. So that is a sign that we have got resistance starting in those situations. So that test, it costs quite a bit of money, around about £150. It takes several months to do. But the good news is that ADAS, BBRO and British Sugar, we're working together to do a rapid test which will get results within 7 to 10 days. And that will help you make decisions prior to the sugar beet going in or during the season as well. I was talking to somebody earlier where you put Conviso 1 on, and sometimes you will get absolutely brilliant control of blackgrass. Another time you will be thinking, is it working? Is it not? I don't know. You could do a test, get that back within 7 to 10 days and know, that's fine, it's going to all go and be okay. Or do I need to put something like clethodim on to finish it off? So that is something to keep an eye on. That will be available very soon. Blackgrass control always comes up, and nothing really too much new there. When we're using conventional chemistry, we would say start off with ethofumicate as a pre-emergence. That's where you're going to get your most activity from. Include some other actives in there as well to broaden the spectrum of the weeds that you want to control. Something like metametron, or you can add in quinmeric. That is useful as well. And then post-emergence, we tend to be relying on the clethodim to give control of the blackgrass. What has changed there is you've got a range of formulations available now. I think the main one we all relate to is Centurion Max, which is a 120 gram formulation. But we have others now which are 180 and 240. And some of those allow you to put a higher amount of clethodim onto the crop. And don't forget, in fodder beet for a number of years now, we've been able to apply a 2 litre rate of the 120 formulation. Clethodim is very safe to sugar beet. It's unlike what you would see in the oilseed rape crop. And so that, I think, is nothing else really to say about blackgrass. Moving on to fat hen, I won't ask the question, but I'm sure that all of you who are involved with weed control in sugar beet will have discussed or had issues with fat hen at some point, ever since sugar beet's been grown. It's the same family as the sugar beet plant. We had a trial up here at Bracebridge Heath a few years back where we had quite a high population of fat hen, and we looked at different mixes and combinations, and we did manage to get 100% control. And I think key messages there are is metametron. If you're expecting fat hen, don't cut back on the amount of metametron you apply. It may be you put it on pre-em or early post-em, build that amount of metametron up. In our trial, we was putting 1 litre per hectare at each application for 3 timings. And then as you get to the later stages, if you've got some fat hen still surviving, then fenmedifam and ethofumicate and oil can be very effective. And again, keep those intervals tight if you're struggling. Don't spray, then think, oh yes, it's looking as if it's going to die. If you think, is it or isn't it, you go back in. Keep their intervals tight. It's nothing worse than letting the weeds sort of start to recover, wax up, and then it'll be even more difficult to control them. So, as we said, 44 plants per metre squared in the untreated. You can't see it from here, but you may do in your little leaflets. So it's quite a lot of fat hen. We went on 2 litres of the 160 fenmedifam, 0.3 of the ethofumicate, litre of metametron 3 times, good intervals, and we got control. So, right, I think we're coming towards the end of the talk. If you've got any questions, would you like to raise your hand or ask me something?